in my view, they're too conservative. In their view, they're not. So I know they're not going to admit they're conservative.
In their view, they're not. In Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown's view, they are. Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, Johnny Mac, John McMullen. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning? A big day in the week is always Wednesday, John, when we turn the page and start to prep for that Week 4 matchup, Eagles-Bucks. How you doing, John?
Yeah, Eagles-Bucks going down a day early. Vic kind of blew that up, which I expected him to.
Yeah.
Which was kind of funny, but that's your funny moment from Vic Fangio. And let me state off. Don't talk about CJ coming back, please. Come on, guys.
Well, we're gonna have to mention it. I know. I think you can just rightfully put it to bed, John, because I didn't think it was ever an option. But people speculated. John, we had a poll on the JAKIB channel, all right, about CJ, and I know you don't want to entertain it, but sometimes the people want to talk.
Well, they can talk about it.
60% want to run it back with CJ.
At some point of that 60%, I'll talk directly to them. Does anything click with you that maybe there are reasons that maybe you don't know about?
Yeah, right.
Anything click at all? So, and by the way, Drew McCuba is playing just fine. So, I mean, there's.
Well, that to me is the biggest thing there. I like what McCuba's done. I don't want to cripple his growth.
Yeah, you want to put him on the bench?
Yeah, and
I've heard the people
Reed's got to see,
all the moving parts. Well, play him in the slot, move Cooper outside, yada yada. You think Vic Fangio wants to play that guy in the slot, a disciplined, fundamental position? You got to be kidding me. I mean, just think it out. Just flesh it out. That's 60%.
Something obviously happened though in Houston. I mean,
you think?
Well, they converted $6.5 million of his salary to a signing bonus like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, so well, I'm not even getting to that. Yeah, obviously something happened.
Are you privy to the information of what happened in Houston?
Well, there's one reporter that covers the team that put up a couple clips of him freelancing, so I'm sure he's getting fed that by Houston. So I think that's a big part of it. I know he was asked for a trade, wanted to blitz more, according to Aaron Wilson. He's and remember who the Houston Texans head coach is, by the way.
Yeah,
D'Amico Ryans, who's one of the most professional players you're ever going to come across when he was here. And as you pointed out, they gave him that money, and how bad does it have to be to do that and then say, you know what, we're out?
Yeah, right. That's why I was wondering if there was something bigger than just him complaining about his role.
Well, he has to be traded. I don't know how many times you say you try to be as kind as possible. He's
a pain in the ass. That's what he is. He's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, he's a handful. And and he's a good player. I've never said he wasn't a good player.
Well, that's where I think I go. Because it's like, all right, he's a jerk or he's a handful or whatever. But can he help our football team?
But even that is it. Well, I think in state, I'd rather have Drew McCuba now. I mean, to me, it worked out. It's very early in his career. I'm not going to say he's going to lead the NFL in interceptions, but I'm comfortable with Drew McCuba moving forward, and I'm certainly not going to stunt his growth. And by the way, if you're bringing him back, then another part, you're taking advantage of the situation. You're paying him less. How happy do you think he's going to be about that?
Yeah, well, not happy.
Maybe a couple weeks.
Well, what's the alternative for him at this point?
Well, his agents should have been talking to him about that in the off season. It's like, dude, you're gonna talk yourself out of this league if you don't at least tone it down a bit. And, Kevin Connor, thinking of the old Sixers executive, Robert Brown, or his agents. I'm sure they've imparted this to him. Yeah, I mean, he's got to figure it out because he's good, but he's not good enough to overcome what he's creating in basically every situation he's been in.
Yeah, I mean, what is this now? 5 teams for him?
Yeah, New Orleans didn't want him. Why? Philadelphia first, go to the Super Bowl, and everybody, great player, leads the league in interceptions despite missing 5 games, and they didn't want to bring him. They said, well, he's asking for too much money. He didn't get too much money. Detroit, now he got hurt there, but when he came back, they had moved on essentially. Wasn't happy about that. Comes back to Philly. Everything's copacetic. They win the Super Bowl. And all of a sudden he's gone. And now he lasts three games in Houston. At some point, the lights got to click for that 60%.
Yeah. Too big of a liability. Probably not going to go that route, obviously. So good stuff. We'll move on, Johnny Mac. Honestly, I forgot about it when I woke up this morning, and you brought it.
And by the way, there's this weird rule. I don't even know if the Eagles could get him back if they wanted him. I'm trying to get
that. I do think somebody debunked it that we could get him back.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I asked the NFL and they don't even seem to know. Yeah, now I don't think it's again the over legislation of this league is ridiculous. And in theory, my thought is that since he was cut, you might have to wait a couple weeks, similar to an injury settlement, that eventually they could bring him back if they wanted to bring him back. But the only reason I tried to clarify that is because, I didn't know. I don't think they're trying to bring him back. So I want to make that clear. But, so I didn't even know if it's a possibility. And hopefully he gets back to me today. But,
did you do any poking around the Eagles organization? They're probably as out on it as you think, right?
Yeah, they're now injuries is the only thing that can, if you're talking about 3-4 weeks down the road, he just still doesn't have a job and they might try to run it back. And that, so you never close the door completely.
Right.
But yeah, that's not, the funny thing is they've been phenomenal in red zone defense early in the season. And the defense as a whole has been, I think, much better than most people. Certainly, I expected to be this early in the season. Like, I have no idea why anybody's worried about safety and Drew Makuba at this point.
Yeah, that's why I said yesterday, I'm like, to be honest with everybody, 3 games deep. I know it's not a big sample size, but I haven't come out of one game yet. Like, we better go get a safety. We better address the safety position. Like, it hasn't been perfect, but I think it's been pretty good, and you see the upside potential with Andrew Makuba. So I don't really think it's necessary outside of an injury or depth, but I don't know. I'll tell you what. How about this point? If you're Reed Blankenship's agent, and not that he has any.
Yeah, Reed's not playing well.
That's what I mean. A lot better with CJ Gardner-Johnson next to him than he did with the rookie.
Yeah, I mean, it's still small samples. I mean, you can point to Saquon Barkley's not playing well.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think anybody's worried about that. And I'm not trying to compare the two as players, but it's a very small sample size.
Yeah, I get the point. Yeah,
I think it'll even itself out. But he hasn't played well, to be fair. But a lot of that is just giving up. Again, you're matched up with Devontae Adams as a safety. And he probably pushed off as well, and everybody's just shitting on Reed. I mean, that's Jonathan Gannon would say. Sometimes you get caught. That's tough duty. That's tough duty for any safety in the NFL.
No, it is, yeah.
And when you add in the savviness of Devontae Adams, yeah, I think people overreact to that kind of stuff.
So Gardner-Johnson done. That he's not coming to Philly. You're telling everybody get off my horse. Whatever.
Again.
No.
I hate to say never. You never say never. 99% leave the door open. If Drew McCoop has a season-ending injury, they might say, "Well, let's try it. Maybe you can stay on the rails for the rest of the season because he just went through this again, and then we'll move on from him after next season." So that's the only option I see, injury related.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't think anybody should be hoping for that.
No,
Ever.
definitely not hoping for that. We'll see what ends up happening with Gardner-Johnson. It was kind of a surprise. He was released yesterday because of that $6.5 million. They basically a move that you would think they would have him in their plans, and then boom, three weeks of football. Done. Now they start 0-3. You know, I don't know. I did see one way to put it. It's like Super Bowl champion safety CJ Gardner-Johnson is mad at the team or is holding the team accountable, sitting at 0-3 team fires Super Bowl champion safety for holding team accountable. I'm like, not a bad way to look at it. The Texans suck. And
Yeah, I don't think that's what happened.
I don't think that's it.
But it's not, it's not. I mean, obviously, their problem is the offensive line, and that's their own fault because they turned that whole thing over and they made a bunch of mistakes doing it. And it wasn't good to begin with. We talked a lot about Laramie Tunsil, and it's like, all right, he's getting older. You don't want to pay him. I get it. It'd be nice to have him for CJ Stroud. And then a bunch of other guys who were just terrible elsewhere. And they, for some reason, thought they were going to coach him up. I don't know. That was a terrible plan, but and I'm sure he wasn't happy getting used to what he had here in Philadelphia. You heard him popping off that he was going to make them a Super Bowl team, like in the off season, like a safety could have that kind of impact if you don't have an offensive line and defensive front. But the minute you start freelance, and that was the reputation here. He would freelance too much.
Yeah, right.
And that's one thing under Jonathan Gannon, who now is a head coach, so would have that kind of cachet, but didn't have it back then. With Vic, that ain't gonna fly, man.
We'll say, Johnny Mac, let's move on here. We got Mike Gill coming up in a little bit. We'll have Brandon Lee Gouton in hour number 2. I want to welcome and thank everybody for being here on a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Hit that like button for us, guys. Trying to get up to 200 likes here on the show today. Got a good crowd in here, so appreciate all of you guys for being here. We'll get to all super chats today as well. John, you mentioned coordinator day was yesterday. Vic Fangio, Kevin Patullo. Some people upset listening to Kevin Patullo saying we were aggressive in the first half. I don't know if you were, Kevin. But what were your thoughts yesterday on just the three coordinators? Michael Clay spoke too on the knuckleball.
Yeah, a lot of big special teams day with all the nuttiness, the field goal blocks, and then you had the joy of the field goal blocks and the misery of the kickoff. So you had both sides of it, Michael Clay. But obviously Vic is always the headliner. I knew it was coming. I knew he couldn't control himself when he was talking about going down to Tampa early. It's like, what, you can't acclimate in one day to the heat. It's so absurd. So I'm glad he did. I'm glad he said, I'm trying to pull it up because it was phenomenal. But anyway, as I try to do that, he can't help himself. And I appreciate that because it's honest. What they're trying to do is they haven't had success down there. And this is a rare time I don't agree with the Eagles because I do think they run, they do things the right way 90% of the time. So I do give them a lot of credit. But, I think by doing this, you highlight there's very few issues they've had in this era. There's one team in the Nick Sirianni era that they have played more than twice. So they're 0-1 against a couple teams. Las Vegas, I think the Chargers. And there's only one team that they played more than twice that they have a losing record against, and that's Tampa Bay. And obviously they've had some significant problems down there. And I think you highlight it by shifting up from your usual way of doing things. So that's why I don't agree with it. But, to his specific statement, he's asked, obviously it's going to be hot down in Tampa. You guys are leaving early to adjust to it. How might the heat might impact the rotations, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, it's too late to do anything right now as far as prepping for it. You don't practice in heat one day and say you're acclimated, or take a pill and say you're acclimated. The key will be it's a mindset, number one, which he said back in training camp during hot days. Number two, we need to not let them have 8, 10, 12 long drives, basically. If you're on the field, you're going to get tired in that heat. But so very key to get off the field as quickly as possible. But I just love the fact that he slammed that door shut, because it's so. Think about that. Yeah, they're here till Friday. They're doing so instead of leaving after walkthrough on Saturday, which is what they typically do. They're leaving after practice on Friday evening, and they're going to have their walkthrough in Tampa. And you're going to get acclimated to the Tampa heat with that extra day. I always go back, and I think I told this story earlier this week when we were down in Miami for joint practices. It was brutal. Like Tampa heat times 10 in South Florida, Miami, 95 degrees, 100% humidity. It was brutal. And the Dolphins have this beautiful new facility. And as you're getting, for anybody who hasn't been to an NFL practice, you started with stretching and then you do some individual drills. The Dolphins did all that in the air conditioning and inside, right, as the Eagles wilted in the heat outside. And they just, as Elliot would say, they just lost the practice pretty significantly. Not that it matters, but
no, but yeah,
Miami.
To your point, yeah, getting acclimated to the heat doesn't really do much.
So Miami, who needs to get acclimated to the heat, they stayed out of the heat as long as humanly possible, because that's what makes sense. But anyway, so
here's Ryan. Ryan lives in Florida. He says, "I live in Florida. You ain't getting used to this humidity in 2 days."
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
And like I said, Miami, who has to get used to it, they stayed inside.
Yeah, right. What were your thoughts yesterday on Kevin Patullo's comments, John? I mean, he spoke a little bit about the Hurts sideline encounter. He spoke about, just a bunch of different things, the aggressiveness of the offense, or lack thereof.
I mean, I said it. We did a whole show on it yesterday. I mean, look, and I know I'm not going to win this argument. People judge results. That's all they're judging. They're not judging aggression. They're not judging conservatism. Whatever they
have been conservative.
Play calling. They're a conservative team by general, by the conventional wisdom of conservative, which is run first. They're a run first team. So everybody that's a run first team, and there's very few of them, is conservative by nature. So if that's the definition, yes, they're conservative. They throw it less than other teams, than the majority of other teams. And then the circumstance of the game, because they were down 19, people think that's the answer. If you're doing that from the start, as you did it in Green Bay and some other games early last season, maybe it isn't the answer. And then you're saying, why isn't Saquon involved? It's a very tough job, but that's part of it. Kevin's a big boy. He can handle it. But, predictable that nobody liked it. Because the Eagles don't look at it that way.
Yeah, but they were conservative. You admitted that to us here on Birds 365. They were conservative.
In my view, they're too conservative. In their view, they're not. So I know they're not going to admit they're conservative.
In their view, they're not. In Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown's view, they are. Well, I'm excited with those two guys this time. I know.
But you weren't last year. They said the same thing.
I agree. But the only reason they ended up doing that last year is because players went to Nick and said, this isn't the way. Now we're in year 2020. It's a different year. And now in a similar fashion, but for the opposite side, you have players saying the same thing. Nick, this isn't what we should be doing this year. It's a new year. You know,
Well,
we
you
keep
have
bringing up 19 to 20.
players.
But hear me out. We keep bringing up 19 to 20. 17 of the 20 games in that were 2024 when you had Milton Williams and Josh Sweat and a different football team. You have a different team this year. I can't just say that record over and over again as the reason for why you would play a certain way in this football season.
I think that would hold more water if they actually lost a game this year. So maybe when they lose a game, maybe they they revisit.
But they're on the margins. I mean, they're close. They
were on the margins a bunch last year. Nobody cared because of the end result. They were on the margins a bunch last year.
They also had Saquon running wild. So, you know, it was a little
bit. But they were still on the margins. Again, you had those games where they were on the margins and with shitty passing attacks and Baltimore and Carolina and yada, yada, yada. And even in the playoffs against Green Bay, they needed the 3 turnovers. Against the Rams, they needed the 2 Jalen Carter rushes. They were on the margins, but the end result is acceptable. You know, it's hard to win this way, which I've said from day one. You're lowering your margin of error by playing the way they play. I haven't deterred from that.
Yeah, you're right. But when you also have a back that's going to set history, you know, that's going to improve that margin.
Well, you don't know.
I'm not on that pace.
Well, so in the shitty game, so the mindset is Saquon had a shitty game. He's averaging 3.3 yards a carry. He's had a shitty run, whatever you want to call it. You want to pull the plug on the historic running back that quickly?
I'm just factoring in that the probably natural evolution that teams watched you do what you did last year all the way to a Super Bowl.
Well,
and now in the new season, there's going to be a different approach and a different plan for the way they play the Eagles.
What do you think? What do you think that approach and plan was going to be?
Well, I don't know. I think that's going to vary depending on the team and depending on the personnel that they have.
Because I think there's been a theme in the first 3 games, and the theme isn't what people think it is. The theme is to stop Jalen Hurts.
Via blitz and all those things. You gave a crazy stat yesterday about 90-something dropbacks and 40-something blitzes or whatever it was.
It's 48%.
Yeah,
48% of dropbacks they're getting blitzed. So to me, I don't even think most people realize what teams are trying to do, and they think they're trying to take away Saquon because of the numbers. They're really trying to pin Jalen in the pocket. And try to limit the off-schedule stuff as much as possible. That's been the theme to me of the first 3 weeks defensively of their opponents. And for the most part, except for Dallas early, it's been successful. But he still is able to make these plays and these gas plays. And week 3 was a little bit different because they fell behind by so much. So to me, that's all circumstance. But it's frustrating. Look, now we're talking about 19 of 20 games. We're talking about into 2 seasons, bleeding over 2 seasons. They had a bottom 5 passing offense last year. They have a bottom 5 passing offense this year. Now, from just that general standpoint, that seems absurd. I get it, but it was the same last year.
Yeah. Well, when Jalen did have that big game, you know, he mentioned that straitjacket comment. Now, yesterday he says that's what we were in the second half. That's what he says to Pam. That's who we are. We got to stop playing not to lose. So
maybe you should talk to Nick like you should talk to Pam.